Welcome to my economics channel where I love discussing the subject, but most importantly, I love to make something fun and interesting to learn. And to that end, I want to convince you that you will want to pay for parking going forward. That actually paying for parking is more fair, it results in better cities, and actually results in cheaper goods and services in the areas where you are paying for parking. And just as importantly, you're also actually going to get a parking spot. So let's say you're pulling into your favorite car park spot. Now, this car park is your favorite either because it's very convenient, it's right in front, or it's very close to where you want to go. Usually it's a strip mall or something to that effect, or it's free, and we'll get to that later. Or it's some combination of the two. Maybe it's cheap, but it's very, very close and you're willing to pay the $1 or $2 per hour or maybe even per day. Now, you might reason that we can simply expand this car park and expand free parking because that will help more people like yourself. And it also seems to help lower income people. But then you think about it a bit further and then you think, we install this car park, but then there's this effect where we might call induced demand, whereby the car park expands, but then we induce more people to come in and use that car park. And then I come in and then I try to park and it's still full, just as it was before it was expanded. This reasoning is somewhat true. It is true that we expand the car park and it's going to get used and it's going to be full just as it was before, much like roadways. However, what's actually happening is that as we expand the car park, we're allowing more people to use it and to get the same utility as people who are currently using the car park. And so as frustrating as it might be to either use that car park, maybe it's very tight, maybe very small spaces, or the roads up until that car park are very small, very windy, or it's just a frustrating experience all around because there's a lot of traffic, you still get a certain amount of utility. You're still deciding to drive, you're still deciding to go towards that car park. And then when we expand it, we allow more people that same opportunity. And so this is why it fills up again. And what's happening, of course, is that people are just exercising good judgment. They're making rational choices. If it's quote unquote free to park in this car park, then more people can now take that option and use that car park. And so there's also the role, of course, of incentives. Once again, because the car park is quote unquote free, that aligns with people either wanting stuff for free or cheap, or simply getting the opportunity where they didn't get it before. And so there's now an incentive to go out and use your car more than you would have previously, which means also the opposite is true. If we remove car park spaces, that changes the incentive structure. It's not that the people keep coming and then they're suddenly lost and they have no idea what to do. Their incentives change and they might decide either to park further away, pay for parking elsewhere, or not to drive at all. So it might seem that you coming along to this car park that's now full, it might seem that it's an intractable position. It might seem like it's an impossible position. We expand it, you still don't get a spot. We make it smaller and, well, you still don't get a spot. And so even when you think about driving and we think about classic traffic jams, you're still getting some sort of utility, some sort of trade-off to driving versus the alternative. And so even though you might curse, you might get annoyed, or whatever other feelings you have towards heavy traffic or simply traffic jams, well, firstly, you are the traffic jam. You're not in the traffic jam, but also you're still getting some sort of utility out of it. You're still deciding to take the option to drive because it's still the best option. And so all we're doing, for example, when we're expanding roadways or expanding car parks, is we're allowing more people the same options as you, the same opportunities. And so of course it seems that when we make that car park free, it seems to help poorer people the most. But the thing is, anyone can use a free car park, even a millionaire. At the moment, there's a lot of talk in many countries about millionaires and billionaires being asked to pay more in taxes or just being asked to contribute more to society. And yet that same millionaire or billionaire can pull up into your car park spot and park for free. Is that fair? Is that the outcome we want for our cities? And so before I continue, this is all drawn from The High Cost of Free Parking by Donald Shoup, an absolutely magnificent tome of a book about the high cost of free parking and how that ruins cities. A magnificent book that's actually 800 pages long. So as long as you've got a lot of patience, it's definitely well worth a read. And so in summarizing the book, and the problems with quote unquote free parking. The issue is that it ruins our cities. By creating free parking everywhere, it helps incentivize more people to drive, and there's less investment in alternative forms of transport. The other thing is, by not paying, if a millionaire comes in and he gets to park for free, someone else, a poorer person who has to take a bus or other form of transport, is actually subsidizing the millionaire. So what do I mean by this? So this gets to the heart of why free parking is not free. So a developer buys a plot of land and they can develop a certain amount of that land. If they are forced to provide free parking, that comes out of the allotment. If they're planning, let's say 500 apartments, due to space constraints, they might only be able to provide 300. However, the price of the land is the same, regardless of the amount of free parking that they have to provide. And so instead of building 500 apartments and then being able to rent out 500 apartments or being able to sell 500 apartments, they can only sell 300. And so to cover their costs for the free parking, they charge higher prices. And so in apartments or simply large buildings where there's retail, let's say on the ground level, if there is free parking, that is subsidized by higher rent in that building. The builder, the developer, charges higher rent in that building, and all the shopkeepers, of course, have to pay this higher rent. That higher rent means that they pass it on to you in the form of higher prices. And so when that millionaire comes in and parks for free, and more specifically when he takes your spot, and when you can't park, he goes in and he pays the higher price, yes. However, someone who's taking public transport doesn't get the benefit of that free parking spot, doesn't get the benefit of that free parking, but they still have to pay the higher costs associated with the free parking that's provided for that building. If it was the case that someone who took public transport got to that place and they were able to pay a lower price than someone who came and parked for free, then it wouldn't be too much of a problem, because then people would be faced with a choice. They go in and they park for free, but they pay higher prices to cover the fact that they're paying for free, or they take an alternate form of transport. They come in, they don't get to use the free parking, but they pay lower prices at the shop or whatever it is that is there in the building. But the thing is, that's impossible. And so we get the worst of both worlds. The other thing is, by incentivizing, by creating a system, by creating cities that are focused around parking, and more specifically free parking, we help those who drive the most. But if you're not able to afford it, or you simply don't want to drive, you're forced into that same system and you're still paying those higher prices. So going back to your example and to the car park, what you would want is you would want a price whereby if you turned up later, you knew in advance and you knew when you got there that you could still get a parking spot. However, you could still pay a price for it. And you might not like the idea of paying for parking, but at least you know you can get a parking spot. Whereas at the moment, a millionaire or a billionaire can come in and take a free parking spot. So what we have at the moment is scarce free car park spots whereby everyone has to rush in and they fight and compete for these limited amount of spots. If you're not able to do this, or your job starts later, or whatever other life circumstance there is, you cannot then get that free parking spot. And so if you're a poorer person and you drive, but you can't make it early enough, then you don't get a benefit from the free car park spot. Ideally, we want millionaires and billionaires to pay for their parking, and we want them to pay more. We want market pricing for our car parks. So what do I mean by this? Well, we start off with, let's say, 50 car park spots. Let's say at 7 a.m., you can come in and you can park for free or at a very, very low price. As the car park spots get taken, because people are coming in early, they're madly rushing in to get these free or cheap car park spots. As they start filling up, the price increases. Now it might change every 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever the increment is. Either way, as these car park spots fill up, the price increases. Now, as I was talking before, this would change people's incentives. This would change the cost of driving and parking. And it could be that the very final car park spot might cost, say, $10 an hour, or $20 an hour, or maybe even $50 an hour. But if you're a millionaire or a billionaire, you're willing to pay for that car park spot because it guarantees you that spot. It guarantees you that convenience. So the millionaire or the billionaire doesn't have to rush in the morning. They can come in a bit later, which means that leaves a bit less competition in the morning. So firstly, we're not going to get quite as many people on the roads at the same time, but also if you're price sensitive, you can come at 7, 7:30 or 8 a.m. and get those cheaper car park spots. And then later on, the millionaires and the billionaires can come in and they can pay a higher price, but one they're willing to pay for the convenience of parking really close. The other thing is, by charging more for parking, and this is what I mean by you wanting to pay for your parking, we can help incentivize, we can help fund more public transport. And so by changing people's incentives and by changing people's actions with this market pricing, we can get more people in alternate forms of transport. And the more that people use those alternate forms of transport, the more buses, trains, trams, what have you, the better it is for the city. Those forms of transport become more efficient the more that people use them. And so there are actually a few effects from people paying for their parking, and more specifically, the very rich paying more for their parking. Firstly, that means for new developments, the developer doesn't have to provide free parking. They can provide this market-based pricing, and it means that they don't have to charge quite as much to their tenants, which means lower rents for those shops, which means those savings can be passed on to you. So if you're taking an alternate form of transport to one of these newer constructions, you can actually pay less. And of course, this is better for poorer people. But also that means more money is being charged for parking, and more specifically by the people who want to pay for their parking. And that can go to the city government, and that can help fund even more public transport. The other knock-on effect is that will take cars off the road, which will make driving more pleasant. Now, you might say that taking cars off the road benefits the rich because they're the ones driving in and they're the ones paying for the parking. But so what? That's good for them. Let them pay their way. The rich, they can use the roads, but they're paying more for their parking. So they're paying more into taxes. So of course, they should get better roads. We can take more cars off the road and we can get better, more efficient public transport. And we can overall get lower prices. And we can just get increased supply in our cities. Instead of massive open air car parks, which are provided for free, we charge people, but then we get lower prices overall. And that benefits poorer people most. Also, poorer people right now who are forced to drive and they're forced to compete in the morning. And you could be one of those people and you could miss out on a parking spot. You now know that you have a better chance of getting either the free or the really cheap parking in the morning because there's less competition. Now, of course, you might say this is forcing poorer people to go in the morning and to compete for those fewer spots that are going to be cheap or free. But what's the alternative? The alternative is what's happening right now, where you might turn up at 8 a.m. and it's too late and you don't get any car park spots and the millionaire might have taken it from you. And so this is why I was saying that by the end of this video, you will want to pay for your parking. Even though market-based pricing or simply paying more for your parking and simply eliminating free parking is neither easy nor cheap, nor something that's going to solve all of our issues immediately, it's more for the long term. It's still a better path, it's still a better solution to our cities, and it will help get people off the roads and reduce congestion, reduce traffic, reduce noise, and just create better looking cities overall. And it all starts with paying more for your parking. So I hope that's convinced you. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask below and I'll do my best to answer them. Or at the very least, I'll collect all the questions into a video and I'll answer them later. But thank you for watching. If you wouldn't mind subscribing and sharing this video, that helps me tremendously. Helps me get more views, helps me grow my channel, which is good for me. And also potentially lets me earn more money in the future, which is obviously a good thing. But other than that, thank you, and I'll see you guys next time.